What is up, you guys? Today we are diving into something absolutely insane. History is literally filled with stories of tragedy and loss. But some accidental deaths are so shocking they're almost unbelievable. I'm talking about events so bizarre, so completely out of left field, that if you saw them in a movie, you'd think the writers were just making stuff up for shock value. But these are real stories, about real people who met their ends in the most unexpected ways possible. We're going to be counting down the top 20 most shocking, careless, and downright bizarre accidental deaths in all of human history, and trust me, you are not going to want to miss a single one of these. We've spent hundreds of hours digging through historical records, ancient texts, and modern reports to bring you a list that is packed with pure insanity. From ancient Greek playwrights to modern-day inventors, no one is safe from the absolute randomness of fate. In this video, we're not just going to tell you how they died. We're going to explore who these people were, what they were famous for, and the incredible, almost comical series of events that led to their final shocking moments. It's a journey through history that proves that sometimes reality is way, way crazier than fiction. So buckle up, because this is going to be an absolute roller coaster of WTF moments. Every single story you're about to hear is a testament to how fragile life can be and how a single tiny moment can change everything forever. We're talking about famous people, influential figures, and ordinary individuals who were just in the wrong place at the absolute worst time. Imagine being a legendary warrior only to be taken out by the tooth of an enemy you've already defeated, or being an inventor so confident in your creation that you test it by jumping off the Eiffel Tower. These aren't just sad stories, they are mind-bending tales of irony, hubris, and pure, unfiltered bad luck that you have to hear to believe. So get ready to have your mind completely blown. We're starting our countdown with one of the most legendary and frankly hilarious deaths from the ancient world. This story is so wild it has been told for thousands of years, and it sets the perfect tone for the rest of our list. Are you ready to see just how unpredictable life and death can be? Let's kick things off with our number one most shocking accidental death. A story that involves a genius, a bald head, and a very, very confused eagle. Let's go! All right, kicking off our list is a story from ancient Greece that is so absurd it sounds like a literal joke. We're talking about Aeschylus, and this guy was basically the Steven Spielberg of his time. He was a legendary playwright, known as the father of tragedy. This wasn't some random dude. He was a titan of literature who wrote an estimated 70 to 90 plays, completely transforming theater as an art form. Before him, plays were mostly just a chorus singing stories. Aeschylus was the absolute mad lad who introduced a second actor, creating dialogue and conflict on stage for the first time ever. He was a certified genius. This man was a war hero too. He fought against the Persians at the Battle of Marathon, one of the most important battles in Greek history. He was a respected, celebrated figure in Athenian society, a true celebrity of the ancient world. His plays, like Prometheus Bound and the Oresteia, are still studied and performed today, over 2,500 years later. That's how massive his influence was. He was at the absolute peak of his career, a living legend whose work defined an entire culture. You would think a man of this stature would die peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his adoring fans, right? Wrong. So picture this: Aeschylus, the great playwright, is getting on in years. He's accomplished everything a person could ever dream of. He's seen his plays win countless awards at the city's biggest festivals, and his name is known all across the Greek world. But there's a prophecy, an oracle's prediction, that says he will be killed by a falling object. Now, if you were a super famous guy in ancient Greece and an oracle told you that, you'd probably be a little freaked out. You'd be looking up every time you walked under a balcony or a construction site. This is a legitimate threat. Aeschylus took this prophecy incredibly seriously. To avoid this fate, he decided to spend his days outdoors, out in the open fields, far away from any buildings or structures that could potentially fall on him. He figured, if I'm in the middle of a giant empty field, what's the worst that could happen? There are no roofs, no walls, nothing to fall on my head. It was a pretty logical plan, honestly. He was actively trying to cheat death, using his big brain to outsmart a divine prophecy. It was the ultimate battle of man versus fate, and for a while it seemed like Aeschylus was winning. So there he is, our boy Aeschylus. chilling in a field in Sicily, probably thinking about his next big play, feeling pretty smug about avoiding all those dangerous falling houses. He's enjoying the sunshine, the fresh air, completely safe from the oracle's spooky prediction. But here's where the story takes the most insane turn you could possibly imagine. High above him, an eagle is flying around, and this eagle has just caught itself a delicious tortoise for lunch. You know how tortoises are, they have those super hard shells. The eagle needs to crack it open to get to the good stuff inside. Eagles are not dumb, they have a system for this. They are known to fly up high with a tortoise in their talons and drop it onto a hard rock below. The impact shatters the shell, and boom, lunch is served. It's a brilliant, time-tested hunting strategy that has worked for eagles for thousands of years. On this particular day, the eagle was scanning the ground below, looking for the perfect rock to be its dinner plate. It was just another day at the office for this bird of prey, completely unaware that it was about to become the most famous eagle in all of ancient history. As the eagle looked down, it spotted what it thought was the perfect rock. It was large, smooth, round, and conveniently located in the middle of the field. It was the ideal surface for smashing a tortoise shell. The only problem was it wasn't a rock. It was Aeschylus's completely bald head, glistening in the Mediterranean sun. From the eagle's perspective, high up in the sky, it was an easy mistake to make. It looked just like a big, shiny, perfectly shaped boulder sitting right out in the open. The eagle had found its target. Without a moment's hesitation, the eagle released its payload. The tortoise plummeted from the sky, a shelled missile on a collision course with destiny. It struck Aeschylus directly on the head with incredible force. The impact, as you can imagine, was devastating. The great playwright, the father of tragedy, the man who tried so desperately to escape his fate, was killed instantly by a falling tortoise, dropped by an eagle that mistook his bald head for a rock. The prophecy came true in the most absurd, ironic, and frankly hilarious way possible. You literally cannot make this stuff up. Okay, coming in at number 2, we have a story that is just as bizarre, but this one is all about politeness gone horribly, horribly wrong. Let's talk about Tycho Brahe. This guy was an absolute rock star of the 16th century. He was a Danish astronomer, and when I say he was an astronomer, I don't mean he had a dinky little telescope in his backyard. This man was a scientific giant whose work laid the foundation for modern astronomy. He was known for his incredibly accurate and comprehensive astronomical observations, all made before the invention of the telescope. He was just that good. Tycho was also a total character. He was a nobleman who lived a life of insane luxury. The King of Denmark literally gave him an entire island and a massive budget to build an observatory, which he called Uraniborg, or Castle of the Heavens. It was the greatest scientific research center in the world at the time. Oh, and did I mention he had a prosthetic nose made of brass and silver? He lost his real nose in a duel with his cousin over who was the better mathematician. This guy argued about math so hard that he got his nose sliced off. What a legend. So Tycho was this larger-than-life figure, known for his genius, his wealth, and his eccentric personality. He even had a pet moose that he would bring to parties, which, according to legend, died after drinking too much beer and falling down a flight of stairs. I'm not even kidding. His life was a constant stream of wild events. He was a meticulous scientist by day and a hard-partying nobleman by night. He was living the absolute dream, charting the stars and rubbing elbows with the most powerful people in Europe. His life was a movie, and he was the undisputed main character. On the night of October 13th, 1601, Tycho was attending a massive, elaborate banquet in Prague. These banquets were a huge deal in high society. They were all about showing off your wealth and status, with endless courses of food and, more importantly, endless amounts of alcohol. As a prominent nobleman and the imperial mathematician to the Holy Roman Emperor, Tycho had a prime seat. The etiquette of the time was incredibly strict. It was considered a massive insult, a huge breach of decorum, to get up and leave the table before the host did. It was the ultimate party foul. As the banquet dragged on for hours and hours, Tycho kept drinking and drinking and drinking. He was consuming vast quantities of wine and beer, as was the custom, But all that liquid has to go somewhere, and his bladder started sending him some pretty urgent signals. He really needed to use the restroom. But the host hadn't left the table yet. Leaving would have been a grave insult to his host and everyone else present. In Tycho's world, honor and etiquette were everything. He was trapped between excruciating physical discomfort and the risk of committing a major social blunder. He chose to tough it out. He sat there, squirming in his seat, as his bladder reached its absolute limit. He believed it was more noble to suffer in silence than to offend his host. He probably thought he could just hold it for a little longer, that the banquet would end soon, and he could finally get some relief. But the party just kept going. Course after course, toast after toast, the pressure was building to an unbearable level. This wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was becoming a serious medical emergency, happening in slow motion right at the dinner table. When the banquet finally ended and Tycho was able to get home, the damage was already done. He was in extreme pain and found that he was unable to urinate at all. His bladder had been stretched so far beyond its capacity that it had either been paralyzed or had actually ruptured. For the next 11 days, he was in a state of absolute agony, suffering from uremia as toxins built up in his blood. He developed a fever and became delirious, but even in his final moments, his mind was on his life's work. His last words were reportedly, "Let me not seem to have lived in vain." Modern medical experts believe he died from a burst bladder which led to a fatal infection. All because he was too polite to excuse himself from a dinner party to go pee. It is one of the most unbelievable and tragic examples of social etiquette leading directly to death. The man who spent his life measuring the vast infinite cosmos was ultimately defeated by his own tiny, finite bladder. Tycho Brahe, the astronomer with the golden nose, died not from a cosmic event, but from holding it in for way too long. All right, for our third most insane death in history, we're talking about someone who completely changed the world of dance, Isadora Duncan. This wasn't just some random person. She was a megastar in the early 1900s, basically the Taylor Swift of modern dance. She threw out all the old stuffy rules of ballet, the tight corsets and rigid moves, and just started dancing barefoot in these super flowy Greek-inspired tunics. People had never seen anything like it before, and they went absolutely crazy for her. She was a total revolutionary, traveling the world, performing for huge crowds and living this wild bohemian lifestyle that was 1,000 times more interesting than anyone else's. Can you even imagine being that famous back then? No internet, no TikTok, just pure talent and stage presence making you a global icon. Isadora Duncan was the definition of a free spirit. She believed dance should come from the soul, that it should be this natural emotional expression. She would literally just listen to music and let her body move however it felt right. This was so different from the superstructured ballet that everyone was used to. She was a pioneer, and her influence is still seen in dance today. She opened schools, taught her unique philosophy, and inspired thousands to break free from tradition. She was on top of the world, but her life wasn't just groundbreaking art. It was also packed with drama and tragedy, which makes her story even more unbelievable. She had this incredibly public and often scandalous private life with lovers all over Europe and a reputation for doing exactly what she wanted, when she wanted. This was at a time when women were expected to be quiet and reserved, so she was constantly making headlines. It was this combination of incredible artistic genius and a life lived at full volume that made her such a fascinating figure. She was more than just a dancer. She was a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of freedom and artistic rebellion that people were obsessed with. And this is where it gets crazy. Her entire identity was tied up in this idea of freedom, flowing movements, and beautiful long draping fabrics. Her signature look always included long silk scarves that would float around her as she danced or just went about her day. These scarves were part of her brand, a visual representation of her artistic spirit. They were beautiful, elegant, and became synonymous with her name. But in one of the most insane twists of fate in all of history, the very thing that symbolized her freedom would become the instrument of her death. It's an irony so perfect, you couldn't even write it in a movie. So picture this, it's September 14th, 1927 in Nice, France. Isadora is with some friends, and a handsome young mechanic offers to take her for a ride in his brand new open-top Amilcar CGSS sports car. This thing was the Bugatti of its day, super fast and super stylish. Isadora, being the drama queen that she was, accepted the offer. Before getting in the car, she threw this massive, hand-painted silk scarf around her neck, letting the long ends trail behind her in the wind. According to people who were there, her last words as she got into the car were, "Adieu, mes amis, je vais à la gloire," which means, "Farewell, my friends, I go to glory." She probably meant she was heading off for a thrilling, glorious ride, but the universe had a much darker, much more literal interpretation in mind. As the car started to speed up, the unbelievably long scarf she was wearing began to billow out behind her. It must have looked incredible for a few seconds, like something out of a movie. This was her whole aesthetic, a perfect picture of her free-spirited life. But this beautiful moment was about to turn into an absolute nightmare in the blink of an eye. The car is picking up speed, the wind is whipping, and that beautiful silk scarf is dancing in the air. And then, the unthinkable happened. The long, trailing end of the scarf got completely tangled in the spokes of the car's rear wheel. I cannot even begin to imagine the horror of this moment. The car is moving, the wheel is spinning at high speed, and it just instantly yanks the scarf with incredible force. It was so sudden and so violent that it pulled her from the car and broke her neck instantly. She was killed in a fraction of a second, strangled and thrown onto the stone pavement by her own signature accessory. It's one of the most shocking and bizarre freak accidents of all time. Her friends, who had just waved her off moments before, rushed over to the car, but it was too late. The woman who had redefined movement and grace for an entire generation was gone, killed by a piece of fabric. The sheer irony is just staggering. A life dedicated to freedom of movement ended by being violently immobilized by her own clothing. It's a story that has fascinated and horrified people for a century, and it's without a doubt one of the most accidental and most shocking deaths in history. You just can't make this stuff up. Okay, this next one is absolutely wild, and it's a lesson that you can literally have too much of a good thing. I'm talking about the death of Basil Brown. This guy wasn't a world-famous artist or a king. He was a health food advocate from the 1970s. And when I say advocate, I mean this guy was obsessed with being healthy. He was convinced that he had unlocked the secret to eternal youth and perfect health. And his secret weapon was one of the most ordinary vegetables you can think of, carrots. He believed that carrots, and specifically carrot juice, were the ultimate superfood. Basil Brown wasn't just someone who added a few extra veggies to his diet. He took it to a level that is almost impossible to believe. He was on a mission to prove to the world that his diet could cure anything and make him basically invincible. He wrote books, he gave lectures, and he promoted a lifestyle based almost entirely on natural foods, with carrot juice at the absolute center of his universe. He was a pioneer in the health food world, long before it became the massive industry it is today. People saw him as this guru of wellness, a man who had cracked the code to living forever. His core belief was that if something was good for you, then an insane amount of it must be even better. So he started drinking carrot juice, a lot of carrot juice. We're not talking about a small glass with breakfast. In 1974, Basil decided to go on a 10-day health kick where he would consume absolutely nothing but carrot juice. He believed this would cleanse his body, supercharge his system, and make him healthier than ever before. He documented his journey, confident that he was about to achieve a new level of physical perfection. It was the ultimate test of his own theories. And how much carrot juice are we talking about? He was drinking a gallon of carrot juice every single day. That's almost 4 liters. He ended up drinking 10 gallons of carrot juice over 10 days. To put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of eating literally thousands of carrots. He thought he was flushing his body with pure liquid health. What he was actually doing was slowly poisoning himself in one of the most bizarre ways imaginable. He had no idea that his obsession, his miracle cure, was about to kill him. This is one of the craziest examples of good intentions gone wrong. So, as Basil Brown continued his 10-day carrot juice marathon, something strange started to happen. His skin began to turn a bright, almost fluorescent yellow-orange color. Now you'd think that would be a massive red flag, right? If your skin changes color, you should probably see a doctor. But Basil saw it as a sign of success. He thought it was the healthy glow of all those amazing vitamins coursing through his veins. He believed he was literally radiating health. He was so deep into his own theories that he interpreted this terrifying symptom as a positive outcome, a sign that his cleanse was working perfectly. But he wasn't radiating health. He was suffering from something called carotenemia, which is what happens when you consume so much beta-carotene, the stuff that makes carrots orange, that it builds up in your blood and dyes your skin. But that wasn't the fatal part. The real problem was the vitamin A. Your liver converts beta-carotene into vitamin A, which is essential for your body in small doses. But what Basil was doing was forcing his liver to process a truly insane, toxic amount of it. He was basically launching a chemical attack on his own body with a vegetable. By drinking a gallon of carrot juice a day, he was consuming over 10,000 times the recommended daily amount of vitamin A. This led to a condition called hypervitaminosis A, which is straight-up vitamin A poisoning. It's incredibly rare because you have to try really, really hard to do it. It causes catastrophic damage to your liver. After 10 days of this extreme diet, Basil Brown's liver completely failed. All the health he thought he was drinking had destroyed his most vital organ from the inside out. It's absolutely mind-blowing. The man who dedicated his life to finding the secret to perfect health died from an overdose of vitamins from carrot juice. The coroner's report literally said he died from carrot juice addiction. It's a tragic and deeply ironic story. He was so convinced he was right that he ignored all the warning signs until it was too late. It just goes to show that even the healthiest things can be deadly if you take them to an insane extreme. So yeah, eat your vegetables, but maybe don't drink 10 gallons of carrot juice. It's one of the weirdest accidental deaths we've ever seen. Coming in at number 5 is an accident so shocking, it sounds like the opening scene of a movie. This is the story of Gary Hoy, a 38-year-old lawyer in Toronto, Canada. And he wasn't just any lawyer. He was a senior partner at his firm, Holden Day Wilson, and known for being a really smart, successful, and confident guy. His office was on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Centre, a huge skyscraper right in the middle of downtown Toronto. From up there, he had an incredible view of the entire city, and he was really, really proud of his office. One of his favorite things to do was show off the strength of the building's windows. This became his signature party trick. Whenever the firm was giving a tour to new articling students or visitors, Gary would do something absolutely insane. He would take a running start and hurl his entire body against the window of his 24th floor office. He'd just bounce right off, completely unharmed. He did this to demonstrate not only his own fearlessness, but also the incredible engineering and safety of the modern skyscraper they worked in. It was a terrifying but admittedly impressive stunt. He had apparently done this trick many, many times before. It was his go-to move to impress people. He had total and complete confidence in that glass. In his mind, it was absolutely unbreakable. He had proven it time and time again. He probably felt like a superhero, showing these young, nervous law students that in his world, even the windows were invincible. It was a symbol of strength and security, a physical metaphor for the powerful law firm he worked for. It was a crazy stunt, but for Gary, it was just another day at the office. This confidence would lead to one of the most famous and unbelievable workplace accidents in modern history. On July 9, 1993, Gary was at a reception for new articling students. And, of course, he decided it was the perfect time to perform his legendary window-checking stunt. He wanted to show the new recruits just how safe their building was. He gathered a small crowd, got ready, and prepared to throw himself against the glass one more time. No one in that room could have possibly imagined that this time would be different. This time, his famous party trick would go horribly wrong. So with everyone watching, Gary Hoy did what he had done so many times before. He took a running start from across his office and launched himself shoulder first into the plate glass window. Just like every other time, the glass didn't break. It held strong. He bounced off it just as he expected. But according to the people who were there, he decided to do it again. Maybe the first impact wasn't dramatic enough, or maybe he just wanted to really drive the point home. So he backed up, took another run, and threw himself against the window for a second time. This is where the physics of the situation get terrifyingly specific. The glass itself, the pane, was incredibly strong. It did not shatter, it did not crack. It did exactly what it was designed to do and absorbed the impact of a full-grown man running into it. However, the window wasn't just a pane of glass. It was a whole unit held in place by a window frame. The first impact had likely weakened the frame's connection to the building. The second impact, just moments later, was the final straw. The glass held, but the entire window frame popped out of the wall. The entire window unit, the glass, the frame, everything popped out of the building, and Gary Hoy went with it. He plummeted 24 stories to the courtyard below. I cannot even begin to process the sheer terror and confusion of that moment, both for him and for the students watching. 1 second he's performing a confident stunt inside an office, and the next he's falling through the air because the whole window just left. The trick had worked in a way, the glass never broke, but Gary had never considered the window frame itself could be the point of failure. He died instantly upon impact. The story became an instant urban legend, a cautionary tale about overconfidence that was so bizarre people questioned if it was even real. But it was absolutely real. An engineer later commented that it wasn't the glass that gave way, but the window frame's fastenings. Gary Hoy literally proved the window was unbreakable in the most tragic way possible. He died demonstrating a safety feature that ultimately failed in a way no one ever predicted, making his death one of the most shocking and ironic accidents of all time. All right, so for our next unbelievable death, we're jumping into a courtroom in 1871. Imagine this. You're a lawyer, your job is to win cases, and you're so committed you'd do anything to prove your point. That's Clement Vallandigham for you. This guy wasn't just some random lawyer. He was a big-shot politician, a former congressman, and he was known for being super dramatic and pulling off these insane courtroom stunts. He literally built his entire career on being the guy who would go to extreme lengths to get his client off the hook. And this time he was defending a man accused of murder. The stakes were insanely high. The whole case revolved around one simple question. Did the victim shoot himself or was he murdered? The prosecution was absolutely convinced that Vallandigham's client pulled the trigger during a bar fight. But Vallandigham had this wild theory. He believed the victim, Tom Myers, had accidentally shot himself while trying to draw his own pistol from his pocket. It sounded crazy, but Vallandigham was determined to prove it. He wanted to show the jury step by step exactly how it could have happened. This wasn't just about winning a case, it was about creating a moment of pure, unforgettable courtroom theater that would leave everyone speechless. So picture the scene. The courtroom is packed, the air is thick with tension, and the jury is on the edge of their seats. Vallandigham decides he's not just going to tell them his theory, he's going to show them. He grabs a pistol, which he believes is unloaded, to reenact the entire chaotic moment. He wanted to demonstrate how a man, in the middle of a struggle, could get tangled up and accidentally fire his own weapon into his stomach. He was literally about to perform a life-or-death stunt in front of everyone, but he was so confident, so sure of himself, that he didn't even think to double-check the gun. This was his big moment, the climax of the trial. He planned to put the gun in his pocket, just like the victim, and then act out the motion of drawing it while standing up, proving that the angle was just right for a self-inflicted wound. His goal was to create such a vivid and convincing picture for the jury that they would have no choice but to acquit his client. He was gambling everything on this one single demonstration. He had a reputation for being a showman, and this was going to be his greatest performance yet. Little did he know it would also be his last. So, Vallandigham stands before the jury, ready to deliver the performance of a lifetime. He takes the pistol, the exact evidence from the case, and puts it into his trouser pocket. He starts explaining, "You see, gentlemen of the jury, this is how Tom Myers could have done it." He begins to stand up, fumbling for the gun, just as he imagined the victim would have. He's completely in the zone, channeling all his energy into this single, dramatic reenactment. The entire courtroom is silent, watching his every move. He's trying to prove a point about a fatal accident, but he's about to create one of his own. And then, it happened. In the middle of his demonstration, as he pulled the pistol from his pocket, the unthinkable occurred. A loud bang echoed through the courtroom. Vallandigham had accidentally pulled the trigger. The gun, which he thought was unloaded, was in fact very much loaded with a single deadly bullet. He had just shot himself in the stomach, in the exact same way he argued the victim had. The room erupted into chaos. He had just proven his point in the most shocking and permanent way possible. Can you even imagine the absolute pandemonium in that room? He collapsed to the floor, mortally wounded. The very argument he was making to save his client's life had just ended his own. It turned out there were 2 pistols on the evidence table. One was unloaded, the one he had practiced with earlier. The other was the one from the actual crime scene, still loaded. In his haste and theatrical flair, he had grabbed the wrong one. It was a 1 in a million mistake, a fatal error that cost him everything. The irony is absolutely insane. He died proving that his client was innocent, and here's the craziest part of this whole story. After Vallandigham died from his wound the next day, the jury was so convinced by his accidental fatal demonstration that they acquitted his client, Thomas McGeehan. The man was set free. Vallandigham literally gave his own life to win a court case. He went down in history not just as a lawyer, but as the man who staged the most convincing and deadliest courtroom demonstration ever. He won his final case, but the price was his own life. That is absolutely wild. Okay, get ready for this one, because it's one of the most famous fails in history. We're going back to 1912 Paris, and our guy is Franz Reichelt. Franz was a tailor, a really good one, but he had a secret passion that was way bigger than just making fancy suits. He was obsessed with the idea of flying. This was the early age of aviation. Planes were just starting to become a thing, and people were going crazy trying to figure out how to conquer the skies. Pilots were still facing incredible dangers, and parachutes weren't reliable yet. Franz wanted to change that. He decided he was going to invent the world's first wearable parachute suit. Imagine a giant bat suit, but made of canvas and wires. That's basically what he designed. He spent years working on it, pouring all his time, money, and energy into this project. He genuinely believed his invention would save the lives of countless pilots. He wasn't just some crazy guy. He was a true believer who thought he was on the verge of a massive breakthrough that would change the world of aviation forever. He was so confident in his design. He started testing his invention with dummies, throwing them off the roof of his apartment building. The results were not great. Most of the dummies just plummeted to the ground and smashed into pieces. But Franz was not a guy who gave up easily. He kept tweaking the design, adding more fabric, reinforcing the frame, convinced that he was just one small adjustment away from success. He told everyone his suit worked, that the early failures were just minor setbacks. He was so blinded by his dream that he couldn't see the obvious flaws in his creation. Eventually, he decided he needed a much bigger drop to prove his invention worked. He needed something iconic, something that would capture the world's attention. So he set his sights on the tallest structure in Paris, and one of the tallest in the world at the time, the Eiffel Tower. He petitioned the Parisian police for permission to conduct his experiment, and after months of back and forth, they actually said yes. They gave him permission to test his suit from the Eiffel Tower, but they assumed he would use a dummy. Franz had other plans. So the day is February 4th, 1912. It's freezing cold, below zero, but a huge crowd has gathered at the base of the Eiffel Tower. There are reporters, camera crews, and hundreds of curious onlookers, all there to see the flying tailor make history. Franz arrives wearing his insane-looking contraption. It's basically a massive cloak of fabric held together by a web of rods and wires. It weighed almost 200 pounds and was so bulky he could barely move. His friends begged him not to do it. The guards on the tower tried to talk him out of it. They were like, "Dude, just use the dummy." But Franz was completely determined he was going to be the one to test it. He climbed up to the first platform of the Eiffel Tower, about 187 feet off the ground. That's like jumping off an 18-story building. He stood on the edge for what felt like forever, hesitating. You can actually watch the footage of this. It's on YouTube, and it is absolutely terrifying. He looks down at the crowd, he looks at his suit, he seems to be having second thoughts. The wind is whipping around him. For a moment it looks like he might actually back down and use the dummy. But then, with a look of grim determination, he just goes for it. He leaps off the edge into the freezing Paris air. For a split second, everyone held their breath, hoping, praying that this crazy contraption would actually work. They were hoping to witness a miracle, the birth of a new era in flight safety. They wanted to see the tailor fly like a bird and float gently down to the ground. The cameras were rolling, capturing what he hoped would be his moment of ultimate triumph, a moment that would make him world famous for his genius. Instead, the parachute suit immediately failed. It just folded around him like a wet blanket instead of opening up into a canopy. He didn't float, he didn't glide, he just plummeted straight down like a rock. The whole thing was over in less than 5 seconds. He hit the frozen ground with such force that it left a 6-inch deep crater. He died instantly. The footage is absolutely brutal. Franz Reichelt became famous, but not for the reason he wanted. He became a permanent cautionary tale about the dangers of overconfidence and not testing your ideas properly. All right, this next one is so ridiculous, you're not going to believe it's true. We're going to 16th century Austria, to a small town called Braunau am Inn. And in this town lived a man named Hans Steininger. Hans was the mayor or burgomaster of the town, and he was a pretty popular guy. But he wasn't famous for his politics or his leadership. Oh no. Hans was famous for one thing, and one thing only: his absolutely gigantic beard. We're not talking about a regular long beard. This thing was legendary. His beard was reportedly over 4.5 feet long. 4.5 feet! That's longer than some people are tall. To keep it from dragging on the ground and getting all gross, he would usually keep it neatly rolled up and tucked into a leather pouch he wore on his belt. It was his signature look. Everyone in the town knew him as the mayor with the incredible beard. It was like a local landmark. People would probably come from other towns just to get a look at this guy's insane facial hair. It was a huge part of his identity. Imagine the daily maintenance for a beard that long. The washing, the combing, the constant fear of getting it caught in a door or, I don't know, setting it on fire by accident. This wasn't just a beard, it was a full-time commitment. It made him a local celebrity. You can even see his memorial in the town church today. It's a giant stone carving of him with his epic beard flowing down to his feet. He was so proud of it, and it was the one thing that made him stand out from every other mayor in history. So in the year 1567, everything was going great for Hans. He was a respected leader, a local icon, and the proud owner of Austria's most magnificent beard. He probably thought his legacy was secure. He would forever be remembered as the mayor with the beard that defied all logic. Little did he know that the one thing that made him famous, the thing he was most proud of, was about to become the direct cause of his incredibly bizarre and untimely death. The source of his pride was about to be the instrument of his downfall. So here's where it all goes wrong. One night in September 1567, a massive fire breaks out in the town. It's total chaos. Bells are ringing, people are screaming and running through the streets, and there's smoke everywhere. As the mayor, Hans Steininger immediately springs into action. He needs to direct the firefighting efforts, organize the citizens, and try to get the blaze under control. It's a high-pressure, life-or-death situation, and every second counts. He's in a huge hurry, rushing to deal with the emergency. In all the panic and confusion, he makes one tiny, fatal mistake. He forgot to roll up his beard. Normally it would be safely tucked away in its little pouch, but in his rush to get out the door and deal with the fire, it just completely slipped his mind. So now he's running through the chaotic streets with 4.5 feet of beard trailing behind him. Can you just picture that? It's a disaster waiting to happen. He's running, trying to escape the flames and organize the town with this giant trip hazard attached to his face. He's rushing down a flight of stairs, trying to get ahead of the chaos. And then, the inevitable happens. He steps on his own beard. The massive, flowing river of facial hair gets tangled under his feet, and he instantly loses his balance. He goes tumbling head over heels down the stone staircase. It wasn't a graceful fall, it was a violent, catastrophic tumble caused by the one thing that defined him. The crowd of panicked citizens could only watch in horror as their mayor took a nosedive down the stairs. The fall was so bad that he broke his neck. He died right there, in the middle of the chaos, not from the fire, but from tripping over his own magnificent beard. It is one of the most ironic deaths in all of history. The very thing that brought him fame and recognition was the direct cause of his demise. Hans Steininger went down in the history books, but for a reason he never would have wanted. He is forever remembered as the man who was literally killed by his own beard. You just can't make this stuff up. All right, so for our next unbelievable death, we're going all the way back to ancient Greece. I'm talking about Draco of Athens. This guy wasn't just some random dude. He was one of the first ever lawmakers in Athens, and his name became legendary for how unbelievably harsh his laws were. Seriously, we get the word draconian from this guy, which literally means excessively severe. Imagine a law code where almost every crime, from stealing a cabbage to murder, was punishable by death. That was Draco's whole deal. He was trying to replace the chaotic system of personal revenge and blood feuds with a written code that everyone had to follow, no matter how rich or powerful they were. But here's the crazy part. While his laws were incredibly strict, the goal wasn't just to be a total tyrant. Draco believed that having a single, written legal standard, even a ridiculously harsh one, was better than the random, violent justice that came before. He was trying to bring order to a chaotic society. People actually respected him for creating a system, even if that system was basically, you mess up, you die. It was a massive step for Western civilization, creating a foundation for law that would eventually evolve into the complex legal systems we have today. So you have this guy who is famous for handing out death sentences like they're free samples at Costco. You'd think a guy this obsessed with punishment and order would have a super serious, dignified end, right? Maybe he'd be assassinated by someone who hated his laws. Or maybe he'd just lived to a ripe old age, feared and respected by everyone. But that is not what happened, not even close. The story of Draco's death is so bizarre, so completely over the top, that it sounds like something we would make up for a challenge video. It's a classic case of irony where the man known for his extreme sense of order died in the most chaotic and frankly ridiculous way possible. It involves a crowd, a theater, and way too much clothing, so let's set the scene. Draco, the legendary lawgiver, is at the height of his popularity. The people of Athens, despite his harsh laws, saw him as a hero who brought stability to their city. They wanted to show him just how much they appreciated him. So one day, while he was attending a performance in a theater on the island of Aegina, the crowd decided to give him a massive standing ovation. But they didn't just clap. Oh no, that would be way too normal. They decided to shower him with gifts, which was a traditional way to honor someone important back then. And you will not believe what they chose to throw at him. So picture this. Draco is in the theater and the crowd goes absolutely wild. They start throwing their cloaks, their hats, and their shirts at him as a sign of respect. It's like a modern-day concert where people throw stuff on stage, but instead of flowers, it's an entire wardrobe. At first, it probably felt amazing. Imagine thousands of people cheering for you, literally giving you the shirts off their backs. It's the ultimate sign of approval. Draco is probably standing there, soaking it all in, feeling like the most popular guy in all of Greece. He's the man of the hour, the hero of Athens, and he's being buried in praise. But the praise just keeps coming. More and more cloaks are piling up. What started as a few garments quickly becomes a small hill and then a mountain of fabric. The sheer volume of clothing is insane. It's an avalanche of appreciation. Draco, who might have been an older man at this point, gets caught under the rapidly growing pile. He can't move. He can't breathe. The weight of all those heavy woolen cloaks is crushing him. The very things that were meant to honor him were now suffocating him. The cheers of the crowd would have drowned out any cries for help. It's the definition of being killed by kindness. Think about the absolute chaos of that moment. One minute, you're a celebrated public figure receiving an ovation. The next, you're literally being smothered to death by your own fan club. The people in the audience probably had no idea what was happening until it was too late. They were so caught up in the celebration, so eager to show their respect, that they accidentally killed the guy they were honoring. By the time they finally dug him out from under the mountain of cloaks and hats, it was over. Draco, the man who wrote the book on punishment, was gone. And so the great lawgiver Draco died not by the sword, not by poison, and not by old age, but by being suffocated under a pile of gifts from his adoring fans. It is one of the most ironic deaths in all of history. A man obsessed with control and order died in the most disorderly and uncontrollable way imaginable. He was literally loved to death. You cannot make this stuff up. It just goes to show that sometimes too much of a good thing, even something as great as public admiration, can be deadly. It's a lesson in moderation, delivered in the most extreme way possible. Next up, we're heading to the world of Vikings. Get ready for epic battles, long ships, and some serious facial hair. We're talking about Sigurd the Mighty, a real-life Viking leader from the 9th century. This guy was the first Earl of Orkney, a group of islands off the coast of Scotland. Sigurd wasn't just some guy with a cool title. He was a hardcore warrior who carved out a kingdom for himself through pure strength and strategy. He was known for being ruthless in battle, expanding his territory and doing all the classic Viking stuff you see in movies and TV shows. He was a big deal in the Viking world. Sigurd was a key player in the Viking conquest of northern Scotland. He and his crew were feared across the land. One of his main rivals was a Pictish ruler named Maelbrigte, but everyone called him Maelbrigte, the buck-toothed, because, well, he had some prominent teeth. These two were bitter enemies, constantly fighting for control of the land. It was a classic rivalry for the ages. Eventually they decided to settle things once and for all. They agreed to meet for a battle, each bringing 40 men to the fight. It was supposed to be a fair, honorable showdown between two powerful leaders, but Sigurd was a Viking, and Vikings didn't always play by the rules. He decided to pull a fast one. Instead of bringing 40 men as promised, he showed up with 80 men, hiding the second group of 40 on his horses. It was a classic bait and switch. Maelbrigte and his 40 warriors walked right into a trap. They were completely outnumbered 2-1. The battle was a massacre. Sigurd's forces overwhelmed Maelbrigte's men, and Sigurd himself emerged victorious, having slain his rival. It was a brutal but effective way to win a war. So Sigurd wins the battle, and his enemy, Maelbrigte the buck-toothed, is dead. In classic Viking fashion, Sigurd decides to take a trophy. He decapitates Maelbrigte and ties his head to his horse's saddle. It was a gruesome but common practice back then, a way to show off your victory and strike fear into the hearts of your enemies. As he rode away from the battlefield, victorious and proud, with his enemy's head bouncing alongside him, Sigurd probably felt invincible. He had just cheated his way to a massive victory and secured his power. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out everything. So there Sigurd is, riding his horse, feeling like the king of the world. He just won a major battle, defeated his nemesis, and has the guy's head tied to his saddle as the ultimate I win statement. But as he's riding, the head of Maelbrigte is bouncing up and down against his leg. And remember Maelbrigte's nickname, the buck-toothed. His teeth were apparently so large and prominent that even in death they were a defining feature. As the head bounced around, one of those big teeth scraped against Sigurd's leg, creating a small cut, a tiny little scratch. At first, Sigurd probably didn't even notice it. It was just a minor scrape, nothing a tough Viking warrior would worry about. He'd probably had 100 worse injuries in his life. He just won a battle. He was celebrating. A little scratch was the last thing on his mind. He continued his triumphant ride home, completely unaware that his enemy was about to get the most unbelievable post-mortem revenge in history. That tiny little cut was about to become a very, very big problem. This is where things take a seriously dark and unexpected turn, proving that you should never underestimate a dead man's teeth. The wound, as small as it was, started to get infected. In a time before antibiotics, even a minor cut could be a death sentence. The bacteria from the dead man's mouth festered in the wound. His leg began to swell up, it became inflamed, and soon a raging infection took over his entire body. Sigurd the Mighty, the powerful Viking earl who had conquered armies and cheated death on the battlefield, was now being taken down by a simple infection. He became violently ill, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The man who had won the battle was now losing the war against a microscopic enemy. And so, just a few days after his great victory, Sigurd the Mighty died, not in a blaze of glory on the battlefield, but in his bed from a septic infection caused by a scratch from his dead enemy's tooth. It is an absolutely insane story of revenge from beyond the grave. Maelbrigte, who was cheated and killed in battle, got the last laugh. His teeth, the very thing he was mocked for in life, became the weapon that killed his conqueror. It's a powerful reminder from history. Never ever tie a severed head to your saddle. It's just not worth the risk, man. Okay, for this next one, we're diving into the world of spies, cowboys, and the Wild West. Let's talk about Alan Pinkerton. If you've ever seen a Western movie with a private detective agency, they were probably inspired by this guy. Pinkerton was a Scottish immigrant who came to America and founded the Pinkerton National Detective Agency in the 1850s. This was basically the first ever private eye company in the United States. Their motto was, "We never sleep," and they had an eye as their logo, which is where the term private eye comes from. This guy literally invented the job. The Pinkerton Agency was legendary. They did everything. They were hired as security for President Abraham Lincoln, and Pinkerton himself claimed to have foiled an assassination plot against him. They chased down famous outlaws like Jesse James and Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. They were hired by banks and railroad companies to be their private police force, hunting down train robbers and Union strikers. Pinkerton and his agents were tough, they were smart, and they were relentless. They were the original detectives, creating methods of investigation, like creating criminal databases with mugshots that are still used today. Pinkerton himself was the heart and soul of the operation. He was a barrel-chested, determined man who was incredibly dedicated to his work. He was known for his integrity and his unwavering pursuit of justice, or at least his client's version of it. He built an empire from nothing, becoming one of the most famous and feared men in America. He faced down criminals, went undercover behind enemy lines during the Civil War, and survived countless dangerous situations. This was a man who lived a life of constant risk and adventure. You'd expect him to go out in a blaze of glory, right? A shootout with an outlaw, maybe? But history, as we know, has a wicked sense of humor. The man who stared down the most dangerous criminals in America and helped shape the course of the nation wasn't taken down by a bullet or a conspiracy. His downfall came from something so mundane, so ridiculously simple, that it's almost impossible to believe it happened on a normal day during a normal walk. A single, tiny, seemingly insignificant accident led to the end of this legendary detective. It proves that no matter how tough you are, sometimes the smallest things can be the most deadly. So here's what happened. One day in 1884, Alan Pinkerton was just taking a casual stroll down the street in Chicago. He's probably thinking about his next case, or maybe what he's having for dinner. Just a totally normal day for the world's most famous detective. As he was walking, he slipped on the pavement. It was a simple trip, the kind of thing that happens to everyone. He stumbled, lost his balance for a second, and in that split second of trying to catch himself, he bit down hard. He bit his own tongue. Ouch! We've all done it, and it hurts like crazy, but you just move on, right? For Pinkerton, it wasn't just a painful moment. He bit his tongue so severely that it started bleeding, and it was a pretty nasty wound. But again, he was Alan Pinkerton, a man who had faced down armed robbers. A bitten tongue was probably an annoyance, not a major concern. He likely just brushed it off, thinking it would heal on its own. He didn't go to a doctor. Why would he? It's just a bitten tongue. He had more important things to worry about, like running his massive detective agency and tracking down bad guys across the country. He completely ignored the injury, but the wound didn't heal. In the 19th century, before people really understood germs and sterilization, any open wound was a roll of the dice. Bacteria got into the cut on his tongue and an infection started to set in. The infection quickly turned into gangrene. For those who don't know, gangrene is when your body tissue literally starts to die and rot because of a lack of blood supply or a serious bacterial infection. His tongue, the source of the initial tiny injury, became the source of a fatal condition. It's an absolutely horrifying thought. The gangrene spread, and there was nothing doctors at the time could do. Alan Pinkerton, the founder of the legendary detective agency, the man who never slept, died just a few weeks later. The official cause of death was gangrene, which all started because he tripped on the sidewalk and bit his tongue. The man who survived the Civil War and hunted the Wild West's most notorious outlaws was ultimately defeated by a clumsy misstep and a moment of bad luck. It's an unbelievable and ironic end for such a powerful and iconic figure in American history. All right. Coming in at number 12 is a story so bizarre it sounds like something a writer would make up, but it actually happened to one. We're talking about Sherwood Anderson, an absolute giant of American literature. This guy was a master storyteller, known for his incredible short story collections like Winesburg, Ohio. He had this amazing ability to look deep into the lives of ordinary people in small-town America and pull out these profound universal truths. It was like he had a superpower for seeing the hidden drama in everyday life, and people absolutely loved him for it. His work influenced other literary legends like Ernest Hemingway and William Faulkner, which is basically like being the Michael Jordan who inspired LeBron James and Kobe Bryant. He was a huge deal, a literary celebrity. Anderson wasn't just some dusty author locked away in a room either. This dude lived a full and fascinating life. Before he became a famous writer, he was a successful businessman running a paint factory in Ohio. But one day he literally just walked out of his office, abandoning his business and his family to chase his dream of becoming a writer. It's one of the most legendary I quit stories in history. Imagine having a whole successful career, a nice setup, and just deciding, nope, I'm going to go write books instead. That takes some serious guts. He spent his life traveling, observing, and turning his experiences into powerful stories that captured the heart of America. So, in 1941, Anderson and his wife were embarking on what should have been the trip of a lifetime, a grand tour of South America. He was planning to write about his travels, meet other artists, and just soak in the culture. This wasn't just a vacation, it was a massive creative expedition for one of America's most beloved authors. They boarded a luxury cruise ship, the Santa Lucia, ready for adventure and new experiences. The mood was electric, full of excitement and anticipation. It was the kind of trip people dream about, a perfect setting for a writer looking for inspiration and new stories to tell. Little did he know this voyage would become his final and most unbelievable story. The journey started off perfectly. There were parties, fancy dinners, and mingling with other passengers. Anderson was in his element, charming everyone with his stories and observations. At one of these pre-dinner cocktail parties, he was enjoying a martini, one of the classic drinks of the era. He was likely chatting, laughing, and doing what he did best, connecting with people. In his glass was a classic martini olive, a little salty snack to go with the drink. It was a completely normal, everyday moment on a luxury cruise. No one, least of all Anderson himself, could have possibly imagined that this simple, elegant cocktail would contain the instrument of his incredibly strange and untimely death. Here's where things take an absolutely insane turn. During the party, while enjoying his martini, Anderson swallowed the olive whole. It's something people do, right? You're talking, you're distracted, you pop the olive in your mouth and down it goes. No big deal. Except this time it was a very big deal. Hidden inside that olive was a piece of a toothpick, a tiny, sharp wooden splinter that had broken off and remained inside the fruit. It was a 1 in a million chance, a freak occurrence that you couldn't predict in 1,000 years. He swallowed the olive, and with it the hidden danger that would slowly and tragically end his life. Can you even imagine the odds of that happening? Shortly after swallowing the olive, Anderson started to feel unwell. He developed severe abdominal pain, but at first everyone probably thought it was just seasickness, or maybe something he ate. They were on a ship after all. But the pain just kept getting worse and worse, becoming absolutely agonizing. The ship's doctor was baffled. They didn't have advanced X-ray machines or modern diagnostic tools on board. They were in the middle of the ocean, with a famous author getting progressively sicker, and no one knew why. The dream trip had turned into an absolute nightmare, and they were days away from the nearest proper hospital. The crew diverted the ship to the nearest port, Colon, Panama, racing against time to get him to a hospital. By the time they arrived, Anderson was in critical condition. Doctors rushed to figure out what was wrong, performing emergency surgery. It was only then that they discovered the unbelievable truth. The tiny piece of toothpick he had swallowed had perforated his intestine. This caused a massive infection called peritonitis, where bacteria from the gut leaks into the abdominal cavity. It's an incredibly serious and painful condition. And back in 1941, before the widespread use of powerful antibiotics, it was often a death sentence. Despite the doctor's best efforts, the infection was just too severe. On March 8, 1941, Sherwood Anderson, the brilliant chronicler of American life, died from complications of swallowing a toothpick. His official cause of death was peritonitis, but the real story is so much stranger. The man who wrote about the hidden complexities of ordinary life died from the most extraordinarily unlucky and mundane object imaginable, a broken toothpick in a martini olive. It's a tragic, ironic, and absolutely shocking end for a literary icon, making it one of the most unbelievable accidental deaths in history. You just can't make this stuff up. Next up, at number 13, we have another literary giant who suffered a bizarre and tragic fate. I'm talking about the one and only Tennessee Williams. If you've ever been in a high school English class, you've definitely heard of this guy. He wrote some of the most famous plays of the 20th century, like A Streetcar Named Desire and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. His work was explosive, emotional, and full of unforgettable characters. He was a master of drama, pulling back the curtain on the complexities of the human heart, family secrets, and desire. He won multiple Pulitzer Prizes and was basically the rock star of the American theater world for decades. Williams himself was as dramatic and complex as any of the characters he created. He lived a turbulent life, struggling with depression, alcoholism, and drug addiction, all while being hailed as a genius. He was openly gay at a time when that was incredibly difficult and dangerous, and he poured all of his personal pain and passion into his writing. His plays were raw and real, and they changed the face of theater forever. He wasn't just writing stories, he was dissecting the human condition on stage for everyone to see, and it was absolutely captivating. His life was a whirlwind of fame, success, and deep personal struggle. By the early 1980s, Williams was in his 70s. His golden years of massive success were behind him, and his health was in decline. He was living in the Hotel Elysée in New York City, a place famous for housing celebrities. He continued to write, but he was also heavily reliant on a cocktail of pills and alcohol to get through the day. He had a nightly routine that involved taking various medications, including eye drops and nasal sprays. It was a quiet, somewhat lonely existence for a man who had once been the toast of Broadway, a shadow of the powerhouse playwright he once was. This routine is the key to understanding his unbelievably strange death. On the night of February 24th, 1983, Williams was alone in his hotel suite. He was getting ready for bed, going through his usual ritual of taking his medication. He had a bottle of eye drops that used a plastic screw-on cap. He also sometimes used a nasal spray. It was a completely ordinary, mundane moment at the end of the day for the aging playwright. He was surrounded by the tools of his nightly regimen, completely unaware that one of these simple, everyday objects was about to play a leading role in his final tragic scene. So how does a simple bottle cap lead to the death of a world-famous playwright? The initial report from the medical examiner was shocking. Williams had died from choking, but not on food. He had choked on the plastic cap from either his eye drops or a nasal spray bottle. The immediate theory was that he had been holding the cap in his mouth while administering the drops, perhaps tilting his head back, and had accidentally inhaled it. It's a freak accident, the kind of thing you warn a small child about, not something you'd expect to happen to a 71-year-old man. The cap became lodged in his throat, cutting off his air supply. This story immediately became the official, widely reported version of events. It was bizarre, tragic, and a little bit embarrassing. A strange, undignified end for such a celebrated artist. The idea of Tennessee Williams, the master of high drama, dying in such a mundane, clumsy way was just too strange to not be true. The story spread like wildfire. It was a shocking headline, a literary legend killed by a bottle cap. It seemed like an open and shut case of a freak accident, a final, ironic twist in a life full of them. But as with many of Williams's own plays, there was more to the story beneath the surface. However, many of Williams's friends and his brother Darkin never bought the official story. They pointed out that Williams had such a strong gag reflex that he couldn't even swallow a simple pill without difficulty. The idea that he could accidentally inhale a bottle cap without immediately coughing it up seemed impossible to them. They suggested a different, more sinister possibility. They believed that the high level of drugs in his system, specifically barbiturates, was the real cause of death. They argued that he had overdosed, and his suppressed gag reflex from the drugs was what allowed the cap to become lodged in his throat. So, what really happened? The truth is likely a combination of both theories. The medical examiner did find a lethal level of seconal, a powerful barbiturate, in his system. but officially listed the cause of death as asphyxiation from the bottle cap. It's likely that his heavily sedated state suppressed his natural gag reflex, making the freak accident possible. Without the drugs, he probably would have just coughed the cap right out. So while he technically choked, the overdose created the perfect storm for the accident to be fatal. It's a tragic and complicated end, a curtain call that was just as messy and debated as the life of the man himself. All right, our 14th most shocking death is so ironic it's almost hard to believe it's real. This is the story of Jimmy Heselden, the millionaire owner of the Segway company. Let's set the stage. Heselden was a true rags-to-riches story. He grew up poor in England, left school at 15 to work in the coal mines, and seemed destined for a life of hard labor. But this guy was incredibly smart and ambitious. He used his severance pay after being laid off from the mines to start his own company, Hesco Bastion, which developed a revolutionary type of portable barrier system that replaced sandbags for military fortifications. It was a genius invention that saved countless lives. This invention made him an absolute fortune. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. But Heselden wasn't your typical flashy millionaire. He was known for being incredibly generous, donating millions to charity and staying grounded. He was a down-to-earth guy who never forgot where he came from. In 2009, he did something that put him in the global spotlight. He bought the Segway company. At the time, the Segway, that two-wheeled, self-balancing personal transporter, was seen as a cool but kind of dorky invention that hadn't quite lived up to its hype. Heselden saw its potential and wanted to make it a massive success. He wasn't just a corporate suit who bought a company. He genuinely believed in the product. He saw the Segway not just as a toy for tourists, but as a serious transportation solution for police, warehouse workers, and people with mobility issues. He was passionate about its future. He was the brand's biggest champion, its savior who was going to take this futuristic vehicle to the next level. He was often seen riding various models of the Segway, testing them out and promoting them personally. He was the face of the company's new era, a hands-on owner ready to steer it to greatness. On a September morning in 2010, Heselden decided to take one of the company's new, rugged off-road Segway models for a spin around his massive country estate in North Yorkshire, England. This wasn't a leisurely ride on a smooth sidewalk. This was the X2 model, designed for tough terrain with big, beefy tires. He was out inspecting his property, enjoying the fresh air and likely testing the limits of his own product, just like he always did. He was an experienced rider, the owner of the entire company on his own land. It should have been a perfectly safe, routine morning excursion. This is where the story takes a horrifically ironic twist. While riding the Segway along a path on his property, Heselden was approaching a section that ran alongside a steep cliff overlooking the River Wharfe. It was a beautiful scenic spot, but also incredibly dangerous. What happened next is not entirely clear as he was alone, but the police pieced together a tragic sequence of events. They believe that as he was riding near the edge, he may have encountered a dog walker. In a simple act of courtesy, he tried to move the Segway backward to make room for the person and their dog to pass. In that split-second maneuver, something went terribly wrong. Whether he lost his balance, misjudged the terrain, or the machine reacted unexpectedly, we'll never know for sure. But in that moment of trying to reverse, he went over the edge of the cliff. He and the Segway plunged approximately 80 feet down into the river below. It was a catastrophic fall, a sudden and violent accident in a peaceful, serene setting. The man who owned the Segway company, who was trying to revolutionize personal transportation, had fallen to his death while riding one of his own machines. The irony is absolutely staggering. A massive search was launched after he was reported missing. Tragically, his body was found in the river later that day. The Segway he had been riding was found nearby. The police quickly ruled out any foul play. It was simply a tragic accident. The news sent shockwaves around the world. The headlines wrote themselves, "Segway boss dies in Segway accident." It was a story so unbelievable that it sounded like a dark joke or a fictional cautionary tale. The very symbol of his business success had become the instrument of his shocking and untimely death. It's one of the most profound cases of situational irony in modern history. The death of Jimmy Heselden is a heartbreaking story on multiple levels. He was a self-made man, a philanthropist, and a visionary entrepreneur who died at the age of 62. He was trying to give the Segway a second life, and his own life was cut short in the most ironic way imaginable. His death forever linked him to his product in the most tragic way possible. It serves as a shocking reminder that accidents can happen to anyone, anytime, even to the experts. The man who bought the company to secure its future ended up becoming its most famous and tragic casualty. Coming in at number 16 is a story that feels like it was pulled straight out of a sci-fi horror movie. This isn't just a weird accident. This is the literal beginning of the robot apocalypse. Okay, maybe not the apocalypse, but it's the first documented case in history of a human being killed by a robot, and it is absolutely terrifying. We're going back to 1979 to a Ford Motor Company factory in Flat Rock, Michigan. The man at the center of this story is Robert Williams, a 25-year-old assembly line worker. He was just doing his job, working in a place that was becoming more and more automated. Now, this wasn't some friendly talking robot from a movie. This was a 1-ton industrial robot arm, a massive piece of machinery designed for one purpose: to move heavy car parts from one place to another with incredible speed and precision. It was part of a state-of-the-art parts retrieval system that spanned multiple floors of the factory. It was basically a giant, powerful claw on a track, moving through shelves of inventory. This thing was a beast, designed for efficiency, not for interacting with people. In fact, it was supposed to be completely separated from the human workers for safety reasons, but on this day, something went horribly, horribly wrong. The system was reportedly malfunctioning, the robot was moving slower than it should, and inventory counts were off. So Robert Williams was sent in to manually retrieve parts from one of the storage racks. This is the critical moment. He climbed into the storage bay, into the domain of this massive machine, probably thinking it was safe or that he could work around it. But this robot didn't have eyes or sensors to detect a person. It only had its programming. It was programmed to go to a specific location, grab a part and move on. And unfortunately for Robert Williams, he was in the wrong place at the absolute worst possible time. As Williams was working, the robot arm silently activated. It moved along its track, completely unaware of the human presence in its path. It followed its instructions to the letter, swinging into the rack to retrieve a casting. But Williams was right there. The massive arm struck him in the head from behind, killing him instantly. His co-workers didn't even find his body for another 30 minutes. They just thought he was on a break. This wasn't a malfunction in the traditional sense. The robot was doing exactly what it was told. It was a horrifying failure of safety protocols and a chilling look at the dangers of a world where humans and powerful machines work side by side. The aftermath of this incident was absolutely shocking. This had never happened before. The idea that a machine, a tool created by humans to serve them, could kill one of its creators was the stuff of nightmares. It sent shockwaves through the industry and the public. Robert Williams's family was, of course, devastated, and they filed a lawsuit against the manufacturer of the robot, Litton Industries. They argued that the robot was not designed with adequate safety features. There were no alarms, no sensors, no automatic shutoffs to prevent exactly this kind of tragedy from happening. It was a machine built for power, with no regard for the fragile humans working near it. The court case became a landmark event. It was the first time the legal system had to grapple with the question of who is responsible when a robot kills a person. Is it the company that owned it, the manufacturer that built it, the programmers who wrote its code? The family's lawyer argued that Litton Industries had been negligent in their design. They had created a ticking time bomb in that factory, a powerful machine that was blind and deaf to the world around it. The factory's safety measures were also called into question. Why was a worker even able to enter the robot's active zone in the first place? It was a catastrophic failure on multiple levels. In the end, the jury agreed with the Williams family. They awarded them $10 million in damages, one of the largest personal injury settlements of its time. The verdict sent a powerful message to the entire robotics industry. You cannot just build powerful machines without building in powerful safeguards. Safety has to be the #1 priority. This case directly led to massive improvements in factory safety standards around the world. Things we take for granted now, like light curtains, pressure-sensitive mats, and emergency stop buttons, became mandatory around industrial robots, all because of the tragic death of Robert Williams. So while this story is incredibly dark and sad, it had a profound impact. Robert Williams' death was a brutal wake-up call. It forced engineers and companies to think not just about what a robot can do, but what it do. He became, in a tragic way, a martyr for industrial safety. His death marked the end of an era of naivete about automation and the beginning of a new, more cautious approach to the relationship between man and machine. It's the first chapter in a story that's still being written today as robots get smarter, faster, and more integrated into our daily lives. Just absolutely wild to think this happened over 40 years ago. All right, for number 17, we have a story that is just so unbelievably tragic and pointless. It's honestly hard to talk about. This happened in 2007, and it involves a radio contest. You know, those crazy contests radio stations do to get listeners, like last one to take their hand off a car wins it. Well, this was one of those, but with a twist that turned out to be deadly. The station was KDND 107.9, The End in Sacramento, California, and the contest was called Hold Your Wii for a Wii. I am not making this up. The prize was a Nintendo Wii, which at the time was the hottest, most impossible to find gaming console on the planet. The challenge was simple, or so it seemed. Contestants had to drink as much water as they could without going to the bathroom. The last person who could hold it in would win the Wii. One of the contestants was a 28-year-old mother of 3 named Jennifer Strange. She wanted to win that Wii for her kids more than anything. So she showed up, ready to compete, ready to do whatever it took to win this prize. The contestants were given 8-ounce bottles of water to drink every 15 minutes. It sounds like a silly, harmless game, right? Just a bunch of people drinking water. But what they didn't know was that they were participating in something incredibly dangerous. As the contest went on, the DJs were on the air, laughing and making jokes about it. They were calling it water torture and talking about how the contestants looked like they were pregnant because their stomachs were so bloated. At one point, a listener who was a nurse actually called into the show to warn them. She told them on the air that what they were doing was extremely dangerous and that someone could die from water intoxication. The DJs brushed it off, joking that the contestants had signed waivers so the station wasn't responsible. They completely ignored a literal life-saving warning from a medical professional. Jennifer Strange was determined. She kept drinking bottle after bottle of water. Witnesses said she drank nearly 2 gallons of water in just over 3 hours. 2 gallons. That is an insane amount of water for the human body to handle in such a short period. After the contest ended, she came in second place, by the way, she didn't even win. She called her boss to say she was going home because she had a terrible headache and felt incredibly sick. Those were the last words anyone at her work heard from her. She left the radio station in severe pain, all for the chance to win a video game console worth about $250. What Jennifer Strange was experiencing was a condition called hyponatremia, or water intoxication. When you drink that much water that quickly, your body can't process it. It floods your system and critically dilutes the sodium levels in your blood. Sodium is essential for regulating your blood pressure and nerve function. When it gets too low, your cells, including your brain cells, start to swell up with excess water. This causes massive pressure inside your skull, leading to headaches, nausea, seizures, a coma, and ultimately, death. The radio station, in its quest for ratings, had created a contest that was literally poisoning its contestants. Jennifer Strange drove home, but she never made it out of her house alive. Her mother found her dead later that day. The cause of death was confirmed to be water intoxication from the contest. The community was in absolute shock and outrage. How could a radio station be so reckless? How could they ignore explicit warnings and encourage people to put their lives at risk for a cheap prize? The story became a national sensation, a horrifying example of corporate irresponsibility and a stunt gone horribly, horribly wrong. A mother of 3 was dead, all because a radio station wanted to give away a Nintendo Wii. The fallout for the radio station was immediate and severe. The DJs involved in the contest were fired. The station's parent company, Entercom, was hit with a massive lawsuit from Jennifer Strange's family. The details that came out during the trial were just sickening. The station employees knew it was dangerous, they joked about it, and they did nothing to stop it. The jury was horrified, and they awarded the Strange family over $16 million in damages. The station itself, KDND, eventually had its license revoked and was shut down. The Hold Your Wii for a Wii contest literally destroyed an entire radio station. This story is just a heartbreaking tragedy all around. It shows the dark side of publicity stunts and the immense pressure people can feel to win, even when the prize is small. Jennifer Strange just wanted to do something nice for her children, and she paid the ultimate price because of the negligence of a few people looking for cheap entertainment. Her death led to a much greater public awareness about the dangers of water intoxication. It's a lesson that was learned in the most brutal way possible. A simple, silly-sounding contest turned into a deadly event, and it's a story nobody should ever forget. Absolutely tragic. All right, for our 18th unbelievable death, we're heading inside the walls of a maximum security prison, a place where you'd think the biggest danger is, other prisoners. But for Michael Anderson Godwin, the threat came from something you'd never expect. This guy was a convicted murderer, and in 1982 he was sitting on death row in South Carolina, waiting for his turn in the electric chair. I mean, imagine that. Every single day, you wake up knowing that your life is scheduled to end by a massive jolt of electricity. It's an insane amount of pressure, and you'd think he'd be doing everything possible to avoid that fate, right? Well, the universe had a crazy, twisted sense of humor in store for him. His case went through the legal system with appeals and lawyers fighting back and forth, which is pretty standard for death row inmates. For years, Godwin lived with this sentence hanging over his head. Then, in a massive plot twist, his sentence was commuted. In 1988, the South Carolina Supreme Court overturned his death sentence, changing it to life in prison. He had literally dodged the electric chair. He was no longer going to be executed by the state. This guy just won the lottery of second chances. You'd think he'd be the most careful person on the planet from that point on, but what happened next is so insane you won't believe it. So now Godwin is serving a life sentence, which, compared to being executed, is a massive win. He's transferred to the Central Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. Life in prison isn't a walk in the park, obviously, but he's alive. He can read books, watch TV, and just live. One day he's just chilling in his cell trying to fix a pair of headphones for his small television set. We've all been there, right? One of the earbuds goes out, the wire is acting up, and you try to jiggle it around to get the sound back. It's a super common everyday problem that you'd never think could lead to anything serious. But this is where things take an absolutely wild turn. Godwin was sitting on his metal toilet in his cell trying to get his headphones to work. What's the one thing everyone tells you not to do with electronics? Don't mix them with water or metal, especially when they're plugged in. Godwin decided to strip the wire with his teeth to try and fix the connection. He bit down on the live wire while sitting on a metal toilet. The combination was literally electric. He had spent years avoiding the state's electric chair, only to create a makeshift one of his own in the privacy of his own cell. It's one of the most ironic deaths in history. Let's just break this down because it's so crazy. This man was legally sentenced to die by electrocution. The state built a chair specifically designed to kill him with electricity. He spent thousands of days thinking about it, fearing it, and his lawyers fought like crazy to save him from it. And they succeeded. They beat the system. He was officially safe from the electric chair, but fate, or whatever you want to call it, had other plans. It's like a Final Destination movie, but even more specific and ironic. The very thing he managed to escape came back for him in the most bizarre way possible. The investigation after his death confirmed the unbelievable circumstances. He was found in his cell, and at first it must have been a huge mystery. But the evidence was all there. The faulty television, the headphones with the chewed-on wire, and the fact that he was sitting on a metal toilet, which acted as a perfect ground for the electrical current. It was a 1 in a million freak accident that perfectly mirrored the exact fate he had just legally escaped. You literally cannot write this stuff. If this were a movie script, the producers would say it's too unrealistic, too on the nose, but it actually happened. Think about the sheer odds of this. The universe went, "Oh, you're not getting executed by electricity? Okay, hold my beer." Godwin's story became a legend in prisons and among legal circles, a cautionary tale about irony and fate. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes life has a script for you that is just stranger than any fiction you could ever imagine. He wasn't killed by another inmate or a prison guard or a riot. He was killed by his own TV set, his headphones, and a moment of carelessness while sitting on the toilet. It's a bizarre, shocking, and frankly a darkly humorous end to a very serious story. What's even crazier is that this wasn't just some old faulty TV from the Stone Age. This was 1989. The amount of voltage running through a headphone wire isn't typically enough to kill someone, but the combination of him biting the live wire, creating a direct path for the current, and being grounded by the metal toilet created a perfect, fatal circuit. His body completed the connection and he was electrocuted instantly. He literally escaped death by the electric chair, only to die in his own self-made electric toilet chair. It's without a doubt one of the most shocking and ironic deaths we've ever researched for this channel. All right, coming in at number 19, we have a story that is absolutely mind-blowing and honestly super tragic. We're talking about Kurt Gödel, a guy who was literally one of the smartest people to ever live. I'm not exaggerating, this dude was on another level. He was a logician and mathematician whose brain worked in ways most of us can't even imagine. He hung out with Albert Einstein, and Einstein himself said he went to work just to have the privilege of walking home with Gödel. That's like getting a cosign from the final boss of intelligence. This guy changed the entire field of mathematics forever with his incompleteness theorems. He was a certified genius, no debate. So you'd think a guy this smart would have it all figured out, right? Like if you can solve the universe's most complex mathematical puzzles, you've probably got life on lock. But here's where things get insane. Gödel had this one massive, overwhelming fear that controlled his entire life. He was absolutely 100% convinced that people were trying to poison him. It wasn't just a small worry, it was a full-blown paranoia that dictated every single thing he did every single day. Imagine being so brilliant you can see the flaws in logic itself, but you can't see past this one terrifying thought in your own head. This wasn't just some weird quirk like only eating green M&Ms. This was a crippling fear that made normal life impossible. He wouldn't eat anything unless his wife, Adele, prepared it for him and tasted it first. She was his one and only trusted food taster. If Adele didn't taste it, he wouldn't touch it. Period. Think about that for a second. Every single meal, every snack, every drink had to be pre-screened by his wife. She was literally the gatekeeper between him and starvation, the only person on the entire planet he trusted not to poison his food. That is an insane level of dependence and an unbelievable amount of fear to live with every single day. For years this system worked. Adele was completely devoted to him, taking care of her brilliant but deeply troubled husband. She understood his fears and did everything she could to make him feel safe. She would prepare his meals with extreme care, taste every single bite in front of him, and only then would he eat. It was their routine, the only way he could survive. But what happens when the one person you trust, your only line of defense against your own mind, is suddenly taken out of the picture? What happens when your fail-safe fails? Well, we're about to find out, and it's one of the most ironic and heartbreaking endings you will ever hear. So the system was in place. Adele cooks, Adele tastes, Gödel eats. Simple, right? But in late 1977, the unthinkable happened. Adele, his wife and protector, got sick and had to be hospitalized for 6 long months. Suddenly, Gödel's entire survival system completely collapsed. The one person he trusted to keep him safe from the poison he imagined everywhere was gone. She wasn't there to prepare his food, and more importantly, she wasn't there to taste it for him. The world in his mind had just become a giant minefield of poisoned meals, and he had no one to guide him through it. With Adele in the hospital, Gödel was left alone with his paranoia, and it went into overdrive. He refused to eat, absolutely refused. Friends and colleagues tried to help, bringing him food and pleading with him, but it was no use. In his mind, every offer of a meal was a potential assassination attempt. He wouldn't trust anyone else. He was trapped in a prison created by his own brilliant mind. He was literally starving to death, not because there was no food, but because his fear was more powerful than his own survival instinct. It's a level of mental struggle that is just impossible for most of us to comprehend. As the days turned into weeks, Godel's body began to waste away. The man who had reshaped our understanding of logic was being defeated by a flaw in his own internal logic. He grew weaker and weaker, a skeleton of his former self, but his conviction never wavered. He would rather starve than risk being poisoned. When he was finally taken to the hospital, it was far too late. The doctors were shocked. This world-renowned genius, a man celebrated for his incredible intellect, weighed only 65 pounds. 65. That's the weight of a child. He was literally just skin and bones. On January 14, 1978, Kurt Godel died of malnutrition and inanition caused by personality disturbance. In simpler terms, he starved to death because he was too afraid to eat. The ultimate irony is that the one thing he feared his entire life, being killed by something he ingested, is exactly what happened. He wasn't poisoned by an enemy, but by his own paranoia. His mind was so powerful it literally convinced his body to die. It's an unbelievably tragic end for one of history's greatest thinkers, a man who could solve anything except the puzzle inside his own head. And for our final, most insane entry, number 20, we have a death so legendary, so over the top, it sounds like something out of a crazy action movie. We are talking about the one and only Grigory Rasputin. This guy was a mysterious Siberian peasant who somehow worked his way into the inner circle of the last Russian royal family, the Romanovs. He was known as the Mad Monk, and he had this insane hypnotic charisma. He claimed to be a holy man with healing powers, and he got super close to Empress Alexandra because he seemed to be the only one who could help her son Alexei, who suffered from hemophilia. This guy held an insane amount of power. People at the highest levels of the Russian government were terrified of him and hated his influence over the empress. They saw him as a corrupt, manipulative force that was destroying the country from the inside. A group of conservative noblemen led by Prince Felix Yusupov decided they had to get rid of him. They believed killing Rasputin was the only way to save Russia. So they hatched a plan, a plot to assassinate the unkillable Mad Monk. They were about to find out that killing this guy was going to be the hardest challenge of their lives. So on the night of December 29, 1916, Prince Yusupov lured Rasputin to his palace under the pretense of a party. The plan was simple: poison him. They baked these little cakes and laced them with enough cyanide to kill a dozen men. They also filled glasses of his favorite Madeira wine with even more of the deadly poison. They offered him the cakes. Rasputin, completely unsuspecting, ate not one, not two, but several of the poisoned cakes. The assassins watched, waiting for him to keel over, but nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. He just kept eating the poison cakes like they were a regular dessert. Freaking out, they then offered him the poisoned wine. Rasputin drank one glass, then another, then a third. We are talking about a massive, lethal dose of cyanide that should have killed him instantly. But the guy just sat there, talking and enjoying the party as if nothing was wrong. The conspirators were in a state of panic. Their foolproof plan was failing spectacularly. This guy was either a god or a demon, because no mortal man should be able to survive that much poison. They were starting to believe the legends that Rasputin was literally indestructible. The night was just getting started, and things were about to get a whole lot crazier. Okay, so the poison failed. Unbelievable. Prince Yusupov, now completely desperate, excused himself, went upstairs and grabbed a revolver. He came back down, walked up to Rasputin and shot him point blank in the chest. Rasputin collapsed to the floor and the conspirators were relieved. Finally, the monster was dead. They checked his pulse. There was none. They left the room to plan how to dispose of the body. But when Yusupov went back a little later to check on the body one last time, the impossible happened. Rasputin's eyes snapped open. He let out a demonic roar and leapt to his feet. This is not an exaggeration. This is what Yusupov claimed happened. The dead Rasputin, with a bullet in his chest, lunged at the prince, grabbing him and trying to strangle him. He clawed at Yusupov's shoulder, tearing off an epaulet, all while roaring his name in fury. The other conspirators rushed in and watched in horror as Rasputin, bleeding and supposedly dead moments before, broke free and staggered out of the palace into the freezing courtyard. He was trying to escape, This guy was an absolute tank, a real-life final boss who just would not die. Can you even imagine the terror of that moment? You shot a guy. He was dead, and now he's running away. The assassins, now in a full-blown panic, ran after him into the snow. Another conspirator, Vladimir Purishkevich, pulled out his own pistol and started firing. The first shot missed, the second missed. Finally, the third shot hit Rasputin in the back, and a fourth, incredibly, hit him in the head. Rasputin fell face first into the snow, and this time he didn't get up. Just to be absolutely, positively 1000% sure, they ran up to the body and bludgeoned him with a heavy club. They had poisoned him, shot him multiple times, including in the head, and then beat him. Surely he had to be dead now. But they weren't taking any more chances. They wrapped Rasputin's body in a carpet, drove it to the Malaya Nevka River, and threw him through a hole in the ice into the freezing water below. 3 days later, his body was discovered, frozen solid, and here's the craziest part of all. The autopsy reportedly found that the ultimate cause of death was not the poison, not the gunshots, not the beating, but drowning. That means after all of that, this absolute legend was somehow still alive when they threw him in the river and had tried to claw his way out from under the ice. That is, without a doubt, the most insane and shocking death in history. And that's our list. 20 of the most shocking, unbelievable, and just plain bizarre accidental deaths in all of human history. From a playwright killed by a falling tortoise, to a mathematician who starved himself out of fear, to the unkillable monk who just wouldn't die. These stories are more than just crazy facts. They're an insane reminder of how fragile and unpredictable life can be. 1 minute you're demonstrating window strength, the next you're falling 24 stories. One day you're celebrating a victory, the next you're dead from a severed head's tooth. You literally cannot make this stuff up. It just goes to show you that no matter how smart, rich, or powerful you are, life can throw a curveball so wild that nobody would ever believe it. These aren't just stories. They are the ultimate proof that reality is way, way stranger than fiction. It's a huge reminder to all of us to appreciate every moment, because you never ever know what's going to happen next. From the ancient world to the modern day, the one thing that connects all these people is that they left the world in a way that no one could have possibly predicted. And we're still talking about it hundreds, even thousands of years later. So what do you guys think? Which one of these deaths completely blew your mind? Was it the guy who drank too much carrot juice, the inventor who jumped off the Eiffel Tower? Or was it Rasputin's insane, multi-stage death that shocked you the most? We spent a ton of time researching these unbelievable stories for you guys, and we want to hear what you think. Let us know which death you found the most shocking down in the comments below. We read every single one, so let us know what you thought of the video. And hey, if you want to see more unbelievable history and insane stories just like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. We have so many more crazy videos planned that you are not going to want to miss. Seriously, click it. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Which one of these stories will you be telling your friends about? Let us know.